Hey, welcome to Medical Stuff. My name is Mark from the Streets Frankham, and this is Chris, Mean Streets of Battleground Finkston.
We have zero street cred. I'm going to throw that out right now.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm very much a suburban white boy.
From Canada.
Right.
That's good.
Yeah, Oklahoma.
No, I'm sorry. There is no album called Straight Outta Canada.
Exactly.
Okay? There is Straight Outta Compton.
Right. It's all just, it's me rapping apologies and just trying to be polite, talking to those fine women over there and sipping on my beer.
Well, Fook the Mounties there, don't you know?
Yeah. So, this evening we're talking about street drugs.
Sorry to any Mounties out there, by the way.
Yeah, really, we don't want to offend
Oh,
them.
sorry.
We may do a tour in Canada in the near future. And by near future, I mean hopefully somebody will pay us to go do that eventually.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
That would be a very nice thing to do.
Yeah, we are talking about street drugs.
We are.
So when we say street drugs, we're not talking about your typical run-of-the-mill, like, finely made cocaine or heroin.
Right.
We're talking your crystal
We'll be talking
meths.
about heroin.
Yes.
Way to mess that up.
Are we going to talk about? Hang on.
Yeah.
Scroll.
Whole section on heroin.
Yeah.
Well, we're not talking about marijuana necessarily right now. We're talking about the drugs that are really messing up people's lives.
Absolutely. And their homes.
Right. So the first one we're going to talk about is going to be crystal methamphetamine or crystal meth. So, Chris, what do you know about crystal meth?
Why do you ask me, Mark?
Well, you seem kind of jittery.
Yeah. So crystal meth is actually something that in our local area was a bit of an epidemic. Mm-hmm. We work in the Oregon area. Crystal meth it's a methamphetamine, and one of its primary effects is that it is an upper.
Yep, it's a stimulant.
Yeah, it's a stimulant, and it'll keep people up for days.
And that was one of the first things it was used for.
Yeah. So
it was originally developed back in the 1919 in Japan from regular amphetamines.
Okay.
Right? And became widely used during the Second World War to keep soldiers awake.
And that would do the trick.
That would do it. I've read or I've seen historical shows on History Channel, stuff like that, where Hitler was using it.
Makes a lot of sense.
Back then, they did not understand the long-term detrimental effects of it.
So basically what we're trying to say is don't use meth, you'll become Hitler.
Exactly.
So, and one of the things that we saw a big uptick is that as other drugs became more expensive and harder to get, methamphetamine,
right,
before regulations got in place, methamphetamine ingredients were fairly easy.
Right.
And people were making it in their homes, and they were selling it.
Fun story, I was on this is back when I first started, I was working in Oklahoma, and we went on a car accident. And it was on a section of road that was straight, but there was a sudden drop-off. So if you didn't really know it was there, it could throw you off. And this guy ended up in a field. So I'm going through this guy's pockets. I'm going to get your wallet out. Is that okay? Yeah, sure. He's on a board and collar. And I pull something out of his pocket, and it's this cylindrical tube about 3 or 4 inches long. And I pop it open, and I pour some of the contents out, and it's this little flake stuff. And I'm glad I had my gloves on, because I look at this officer, and I go, "Hey, man, what is this?" He goes, "Oh, that's probable cause is what that is." It was flaked iodine, which they used in the production of methamphetamine.
Oh, gotcha.
That gave him probable cause to search the car, where they found a portable meth lab in the trunk.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I think it's back to its history, though. So I'm reading here in the 1950s, it was used as a diet aid.
It also became, they did, because it will.
And an antidepressant.
An antidepressant, because you are much more upbeat and energetic with methamphetamines. Also, it kills your appetite.
Yeah.
So if you'll be getting, not only are you not eating, but you also have more energy to go do stuff.
Yeah. So in the 1970s, we made it illegal here in the U.S.
Right. So after that, American motorcycle gangs were really the ones that took over the trade, and it was used a lot in the trucker community.
That's where it came up. Didn't it get the nickname biker coffee or biker juice?
There was when it's mixed with other stuff, it can be called that.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it became very easy to make. It's also known as a stovetop drug because you don't need special equipment necessarily. Mm-hmm. I mean, Walter White may argue with that, but
well, it depends on what you're going for.
Right, the purity. So, you don't really need a whole lot as long as you have an apartment with a stove and some basic equipment.
Or an RV.
Right, or an RV. You can make meth.
Yeah.
So, I mean, some of the stuff, but the problem is that some of the stuff that goes into making meth, because they're taking over-the-counter tablets of Sudafedrin. which is your stimulant, which is your amphetamine type medication. And then you're mixing that with just all sorts of horrific things.
Oh, let's see. Acetone.
Yeah.
Ammonia.
Hydrochloric acid can be used.
Oh, Jesus. Lithium. Yeah. Lithium found from batteries, by the way. We're not talking what you got at your pharmacy, although it is still lithium.
But in a much, yeah.
So, yeah, the red phosphorus found off of matchboxes, that's actually used in a few drugs we'll talk about today.
Right.
So we're going to be talking about Krokodil later, and that's used in that production as well.
Toluene, which is a brake fluid. It's also an engine solvent. So if you're cleaning your engine...
But don't forget sulfuric acid found in drain cleaner and toilet cleaner.
Or, sulfuric acid, which is lye. So this is what's going into making the drug. Absolutely. The problem is that this also, while you're doing this, you're heating it up and it becomes a vapor form of these chemicals. Mm-hmm. And it will soak into the walls of the place where you're living. Or you're
Not to mention it's toxic to the user.
It is. I was reading an article about a family in Oregon, Southern Oregon, who moved into a house, and within days, the wife started having respiratory problems. The child started developing sores in his mouth because of the vapors that were in the house that were leached into the walls. Yeah. And it's that detrimental to the fact that the federal government in 2007 passed the EPA, put out the Methamphetamine Remediation Research Act, which they had to develop guidelines for remediation of former methamphetamine labs. So if your house or an apartment or a motel room is found to have been a methamphetamine lab, they actually have guidelines they have to use to be able to clean that to make it habitable for human beings.
And it looks like one of the big problems is that a lot of these things will permeate the drywall itself.
It'll permeate into the studs. You have to go down to stud and clean the studs.
Damn.
Yeah. So, takes two different efforts. The gross chemical removal, this is the process by which, the law enforcement and the DEA remove the obvious dangers from the site. Now, in EMS, how does this affect us? Well, if we go into a house and we don't realize that it's a methamphetamine lab, it's dangerous. These things are explosive. These things blow up on a regular basis, on top of being exposed to the chemicals that are in the air and in the wall.
We walk into so many houses, and there's so many hazards, from dogs to animals to the people inside, that this is just kind of one more thing that now we get to worry about.
Right.
Now, it wasn't until the 2000s that at least our state, Oregon, started imposing strong restrictions on pseudoephedrine, medications containing pseudoephedrine.
Right. You have to actually show an ID and be put into a log every time you buy it.
Well, and that's in Washington State. In Oregon, it's prescription only.
Oh, really?
Can't get it here, without a prescription.
Oh.
I know this every cold season. I am absolutely reminded of that fact. Because the stuff works. Great for a cold. We do not give this a code 99.
Not good for a code at all.
A code, in case you're not aware, is someone's not breathing, no pulse.
Yeah, cardiac arrest. CPR is being done.
Yeah. Someone get the Sudafed, quick. Stick it up a nostril, call it good. And so there's been a lot of regulation which has increased the cost of making methamphetamine because finding the pseudoephedrine now takes more of an effort.
Right. Well, unfortunately, what's also made it do is it makes it go into the black market.
It does.
So when you're trying to clean it, you obviously, like I said, you have the gross chemical removal. This does not remove any chemical spills or residues or anything else. There you have to do is called a clandestine remediation. I'm assuming they mean
fire.
What?
I'm thinking fire at that point.
No. But to me, a clandestine remediation means like they don't meet at the house. They all come in separately through different doors at night. They all nod each other and touch the sides of their nose. Well, it's clandestine. But no, this cleans the interior of the structure. It can be also the surrounding land, surface waters, groundwater by EPA approved or National Crime Scene Cleanup Association certified company.
Jesus.
This is removing they have to take it down to the stud, and then they have to cleanse the studs and everything with a chemical to clear out all this stuff to make it safe for people to live in here. So this is from the beginning to the end, from the making, from the production of it to the ingestion of it. It's just bad stuff all the way around.
Absolutely.
But it's very, very popular and very addictive.
And it goes by a few names, and so Mark has compiled a list of different names on here, and I love all these names. Speed, Crank, Tweak I've definitely heard, Uppers, Chalk, Christina, that sounds nice, Tina, Go Fast, That's from Alabama. And here's why I know that's from Alabama. I don't know that that's from Alabama, but I think that's from Alabama because we used to have a mechanic that worked at our ambulance company. And he was from Alabama. Mm-hmm. And very common in the culture there, you call things by what they do. Deodorant is called smell good, for example. So when I see go fast, I'm like, that's
going to be an Alabama thing right there.
By the way, love Alabama. If you're listening.
We're not saying that it definitively comes from there. We're just saying it sounds like it was something they would say.
Cookies, cotton candy, Dunk, Gak. Gak, I believe, was like a competitor to Silly Putty way back when.
Boy, don't mix those two up. I mean, you think meth's bad for you. Gak, ingesting Gak.
My kids love Gak.
I like Go-Go Juice.
Go-Go Juice is good. No Doze. White Cross. Because I'm just thinking little white crosses on the side of the road, which would make sense if you're driving while on meth.
Pokey.
Is that Pokey or Pookie?
Yes.
Rocket Fuel Scooby Snacks. Wash, trash, garbage.
Yeah, let's take garbage.
I think that works out.
So then when you mix these drugs with like cocaine or ecstasy, crack and coffee, this is where you get twisters, hugs and kisses, fire, shabu, your biker coffee, and then party and play. Okay, so those are some of the various street names of the medication, but if you're using it, there are also some street names for there, and some of these kind of tickle me. Getting geared up.
Chicken flipping?
Chicken flipping. Hot rolling.
Hot rolling makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. I like that one.
Fried, foiled. Speed freak, that sounds pretty good. Tweaking, I think a lot of people have heard. At least in EMS, you hear tweaking a lot.
Absolutely.
Scattered, spun out, and zooming.
See, the problem is scattered to me, that's just how I describe just people as scattered. That guy generally pretty scattered.
Right. Now it takes a whole new term on now, you know?
Totally does. So what do you experience when you get this, or when you take this? Well, there's an intense initial rush that may persist for about 30 minutes.
And this is that speed feeling.
People feel they have a higher motivation to accomplish goals. This is where you get that stereotype of, meth heads cleaning a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Cleaning.
Oh, yeah. I've been there. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and this person is just going to town on their kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a guy that it took us 30 minutes to walk him from his apartment through his... He had an apartment where... it's the style of apartment where you enter basically an entire complex. It's a building, and all the accesses in covers. And we're just trying to walk him out. Mm-hmm. And undercover, I should say. We're just trying to walk him out, and every piece of trash he sees along the way, he's like, we got to get that. Mm-hmm. We got to get that. And it's like a breakdown, right there until the trash is removed.
But they also have confidence in feelings of improved intellect. So they know how to fix everything.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what it seems like.
I was going to say, operative word, feelings of improved intellect.
But you also have the loss of appetite, which a lot of people go for if they're trying to lose weight. Yeah. So you can get significant weight loss. People who are chronic meth users, generally very skinny. Their skin is generally in poor condition because they're not taking in the nutrients that they need to support life.
Yeah. Thinning hair.
Mm-hmm. They can also, it changes their sleep patterns because you can't go for, these people they'll go for days when they go on a bender.
One of the things that we get to deal with, too, is the severe mood swings after that and unpredictable behavior. Well,
so this is another guy in Oklahoma, had been in recovery. 3 days earlier, he left the house to go to the store in his mom's car. He has no idea what happened to the car. He's been on a 3-day bender. Something happened while he was between his house and the store that he went and bought some meth. It's now 3 days later, and he's up in a bad area of town. He's been beat up. No idea where his mom's car is. He goes, there's a possibility I sold it for money.
Wow.
To buy more drugs.
Yeah.
It's just a horrible drug.
Oh, yeah.
People lose teeth. They will pick at their own skin till there's sores.
Well, a lot of times, at least in my experience, I can't really say a lot of times, but we had a patient that was convinced, this is kind of part of this cleanliness thing that I've noticed. They were convinced that they had dirt in their pores on their face. And, which actually is normal to have dirt in your pores. It's called blackheads, you know. And the only way they saw to get the dirt out was to pick at their face incessantly.
Oh, yeah.
This person had ruined their face. And here's the hard part about that is, even long after this meth addiction is kicked, those scars are going to be there.
Oh, yeah.
For life.
Absolutely. Along with this other stuff, you also get hyperthermia because you're just go, 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 go. You never get a chance to slow down.
Increased heart rate as well.
Increased heart rate, elevated blood pressure. But, these can be the patients that die because they just don't stop. We have to be careful in EMS that we don't overexert these people trying to contain them.
So, maybe this is out of step with the tone we're taking, but when he said they just don't stop, immediately "Don't Stop Believin'" popped into my head.
Yeah.
Don't stop.
But along with the elevated blood pressure and the rapid heart rate, you can also develop an irregular heart rhythm, which can be detrimental. I mean, if you get too much of an irregular heart rhythm for too long, you can die. You can die. But those are the short-term effects. You have some long-term effects that go along with that, and one of them is body sores from users picking at the skin.
Yeah.
We just went over that.
Like I said, that can leave scars for life.
Absolutely. Breathing problems from
You good, man?
Not really. Breathing problems associated with smoke inhalation. It damages the blood vessels in your body, causing you to have strokes. You could end up in a coma from this. But without that, it increases any mental health issues like depression, anxiety, or social isolation that you may have had to begin with. It amplifies those. It can also cause delusions, paranoia, hallucinations. I really want to do a South Park impersonation right here about drugs being bad, but I'm going to refrain from that. Crystal methamphetamine. It is an epidemic.
Yeah,
and it destroys lives.
So we started seeing a rise in crystal meth in our area as heroin became more expensive and crystal meth became cheaper. And then as we started to see crystal meth become more expensive, heroin started coming back into vogue.
Right.
And so why don't we talk about heroin?
Okay.
The H.
So heroin, it's an opiate derivative, and we're going to do a whole show in the near future on opiates and their history and what a lot of people are talking about in the news. Heroin is in the same family as opium. They all come from the poppy plant. And opium is actually is a multi-year, 100-year, 1,000-year drug. It's been around for centuries.
Well, heroin, 1900 or even 1800s when it was first.
Right.
It was let me see, I think I got the date. 1898.
Right.
1898, and funny enough, the compound was actually first marketed by Bayer as a medication.
Right.
And they called it heroin. And it was probably derived from, I can't pronounce that word. Was that Hirosh?
Yeah, that's where the name came from, which is a German medical term for a strong, powerful, extreme effect from small doses.
Wow.
So this was derived from morphine. It is diacetylmorphine. I'm going to keep saying it until I get it right.
Jawohl.
And this was made because a lot of your morphine is injectable, especially back then, and still even today. You don't generally find liquid morphine.
Yeah. You
don't find morphine tablets too much.
Right.
So,
for a number of years, we gave morphine on the ambulance IV.
Right.
Yeah.
So this was developed. It could be taken in an oral form, a powder form. I was reading one story about a gentleman. They were using it a lot as a cough suppressant and sedative. Initially, that's what it was brought in for. There was the story of a patient who had a chronic cough. Sounds like he was maybe in CHF, and then he started given morphine in a sanitarium. He'd been in and out of the hospital for this problem multiple times, and so a sanatorium. This was a sanatorium. I'm sorry. These were places back in the day where you were sent to when you had severe illnesses like tuberculosis.
Yeah.
You had to be kept away from everybody else, and so you would go to a sanatorium, and they were horrific.
And what a lot of people might confuse was sanitarium would be something that involving your sanity.
Right.
Sanatorium is a sanitary area. That's kind of where that word comes from.
I don't think the Metallica hit would have been as good if it was sanatorium.
I was thinking the same thing. Could you imagine sanatorium?
Yeah.
Make me clean.
Exactly.
All right, I'll stop.
Please stop. But anyway, he was given this medication, and it actually he started sleeping during the night. He started breathing better. He started having slower respiratory rates because he could breathe better. but they didn't understand the addictive qualities of this.
They also didn't really understand why. And actually, fun fact, even prescription cough syrups today contain opioids for this exact reason.
And we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Yeah, and it's the thing that opioids do is they do a couple things for you. And one of the things that they do is they decrease air hunger. In other words, your body's natural drive to take in more oxygen is dampened. And this is actually what ultimately results in an overdose. Is eventually your body just says, I don't need air anymore.
Right.
And stops breathing. So if you are someone who has a chronic breathing condition that constantly makes you hungry for air, and you take a medication that reduces that, your respiratory rate lowers. And you feel better.
Right.
Unfortunately, you're not taking in the oxygen you need to take in. You just don't know it.
Right. One of the quotes I saw that, it kind of made me chuckle was like, it took a long time for the medical profession to realize the full danger of heroin addiction. On the other hand, very little time passed after the drug became readily available before the underworld and smugglers discovered that heroin possessed properties even beyond those of other narcotics. So although it took the doctors a long time to realize just how addictive this was, the drug dealers and the gangsters were like, oh, this stuff is good.
We're on it.
Yeah. So, starting in about 1916. So, this is, not too many years after it was discovered and started being used. The public health services hospitals in the United States discontinued dispensing heroin at its relief stations in 1916.
If you can imagine that concept, and we got to understand the drug regulations we have in place didn't always exist.
No.
And the tight control. These were being dispensed at relief stations.
Right. Yeah. You need relief, you go by and the government will just give this to you because it made people feel better.
Yeah.
You hear conspiracy theories now about the government drugging this population. Yeah, they used to.
Yeah, they used to do it. Well-intentioned.
Right, exactly. People walked up and took it. In 1920, though, the House of Delegates of the American Medical Association said that heroin should be eliminated from all medicinal preparations and that it should not be administered, prescribed, or dispensed. And this is about the time where everybody in the world was really starting to see that this was a bad drug, and the products needed to make it started becoming regulated.
Right.
But it still took until 1924 before the Heroin Act was enacted, which made it legal to possess or produce heroin. So, like I said...
And that stopped everybody. It's not a problem anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Bam, right there.
So there's actually a couple different forms of heroin. So there's white heroin generally comes from Southeast Asian powder form, and it's easily dissolvable in water, and it's quite acidic. Off-white or light brown heroin that comes from Colombia, it's powdered, also dissolves easily in water. Brown heroin is coarser than white, although it still comes in a powder. Generally from Southwest Asia, it's hard to dissolve in water and is pretty stable when exposed to heat. That is, it's difficult for it to change form or structure when heat is applied.
You have the dark brown or black heroin.
It's your favorite, right?
Yeah, exactly. It comes from Mexico, and it's a solid, or as opposed to a powder, it is less pure than the lighter forms of heroin. It can be made into a solution by adding heat. So this is where you find people freebasing. This is where you get your heroin spoon.
Gotcha.
And you mix this with some sort of liquid. A lot of times, I think they have been known to use like ether.
What is it? Is that so? Is freebasing is the base what you're mixing it with?
You mean the term where it came from, freebasing?
Yeah, because I've heard this term, and I'm not particularly familiar.
So what I understand freebasing to be is you're actually breaking down the drug into a liquid form so it can be injected.
Gotcha. Okay.
So you take your powder, you heat it up with a liquid of some form, and then you're able to draw that up and inject it straight into your veins.
Or an artery, go big or go home.
Right.
Let's get this done.
So, this black tar heroin. The problem with any heroin is that it's non-regulated. It's illegal. So what can happen, and where generally we get called for these calls, is somebody has gotten a hold of heroin that's more pure than they're used to, but they use the same amount.
Right. Well, and we talked about meth coming in vogue, heroin getting expensive, meth coming in vogue, meth getting hard to get, heroin coming back. And what we did see is we saw people who were used to taking heroin in the 80s and at the concentrations or at the level that heroin was at then, get back into heroin for the first time in a long time, take their old dose.
Right.
And this is different heroin than they used to have.
Right.
It's been a few decades.
What can happen at just a really pure batch? So what they do is they take the pure form of heroin, and so a person who produces that will sell it to a dealer.
Yeah.
And then that dealer, to help amplify and make profit, will cut it with something else. So it's not as pure, but you have more of it, so you can sell it.
Right.
Depending on where and this can happen multiple times, down to where you have, a very small amount, less than 10%.
And then God knows what else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, not regulated. It's kind of whatever they found. Whatever's handy at that point. But, so you're used to having heroin that's 2 to 5% pure, and then a batch comes through that didn't go through as many levels of dealers who kept cutting it, and now you have something that's 15 or 20% pure. And so you have a heroin form that is much more potent, but you don't know that.
Right.
And
now you're overdosed. I
had a patient who, that was a cardiac arrest. We get there. My partner, who was a trainee, he goes in first with the monitor. I'm grabbing the other kits. We're first on scene. I get upstairs. This guy is sitting in the middle of his floor, a little weirded out that we're there, soaking wet. And there's a young lady there. So I walk in, I look around. My partner's going, "What's going on? What's going on?" The guy's going, Nothing. What'd you smoke? Nothing. Dude, there is a 4-foot bong and a bag of weed by your bed. And I looked at my guy and I was like, were you smoking heroin? And both him and my partner gave me this for different reasons, looks of, how'd you know that?
Right.
Well, because he smoked the heroin, or shot the heroin. I think they were smoking it.
Sure.
It was a pure form than he was used to, and it knocked him out, knocked out his respiratory drive. So the girl was throwing cold water on him, trying to revive him and stimulate him into breathing.
Gotcha.
When that didn't work, she called 911. Right?
Yeah.
So he told me, do you want to know why he does heroin?
Why?
He wants to get into modeling. Wait, it's not even that simple. It's not that simple. He wants to get into modeling, and in case anybody ever offers him heroin, he didn't want to seem lame. That was why he told me he was doing heroin. He's also sitting there scratching.
This, by the way, is why reality TV is not a guide for life.
No, not at all. He's also scratching his head, his arms, his chest. My first thought was, man, if you have scabies, I swear.
Damn it.
Yeah. I go, why are you scratching? Well, this always happens when I smoke heroin. Yeah, it's called an allergic reaction. You now have more reasons to not smoke heroin than the rest of us on this planet. So, yeah, I mean, he was using a dosage, basically a concentration that he wasn't used to, and it knocked out his respiratory drive, and he'd stop breathing.
Wow. But, at least he has a good reason to be doing heroin.
Well, yeah, what I told him was, I go, see, if that were me, I'd go, oh, yeah, heroin. Yeah, I used to do that back when I was poor.
Right.
Jokingly, he goes, oh, that's good. I'm like, oh, dear sweet Jesus. Sweet baby Jesus, help me here. Help me. So, some of its names.
Black tar.
Ooh, China White.
Dope.
Eighth. Don't understand that one.
H.
Yeah. Horse. Yeah.
Which, by the way, playing horse now has a difference.
It does. Yeah. Well, you have to have some H if you're going to play horse.
Yeah, well, that's how you start.
Exactly. Junk.
Mexican brown.
Poppy.
Skag.
And then Smack, which holds a little memory for me, because I remember back when I was a kid, my sister had a book that was going around. It was called Dinky Hawker Shoots Smack. And it was a story about drug addiction.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Totally.
It was like 14 kind of book.
Wow.
But that's my only real
See, I think Smacks, the old cereal with the frog.
Sugar Snaps? Yeah, that's...
Gotta have my Smacks or something like that. Or maybe I'm remembering this wrong.
There you go. Yeah, it's a book. It's a book by Mary Jane. Mary Jane Meeker wrote Dinky Hawker Shoots Smack. Yeah. The plight of a girl who is hooked on a food and whose mother is too busy to be concerned. In the face of her mother's... wow. This is made in 1972.
This is a deep book for a kid.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I think it was like a teen sort of thing. I could be wrong. It could have been totally adult. And So, yeah.
Oh, shit. All right.
Yeah, Dinky Hawker shoot smack. So, some of the negative effects of this.
What are the positive effects?
Well, the positive effects,
nice.
you get the euphoric feeling, right? You get a rush or high of intense pleasure. It lasts about 30 minutes. And this is where you see, I guess you see on TV, I don't like to use TV as an example or movies as an example because they generally tend to be more for theatric productions.
Especially in the medical field.
Exactly. But, they inject it and then they automatically always just relax because they're taken to that high. Now, I've also heard the first time you do heroin, you're going to puke your guts out. And it is a side effect of the drug.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, so I don't understand why people get hooked on it, only for the fact of, if I do something that makes me puke my guts out, I tend to not do it anymore.
Right.
Yeah,
right. I will never eat an entire container of mustard again.
Right.
One time.
Or 2 quarts of blueberries.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Yeah, we already covered that.
Yeah, listen to our anaphylaxis episode, and
you'll
you'll
understand that reference.
You'll see the story there.
But after that, they get experience of warm, flushed feeling, accompanied by wakefulness and sleepiness. It can last for 3 to 4 hours. Which, Krokodil, which we'll get to eventually, came about because of the expense of heroin.
Yeah.
Here it was meth that became popular. In Russia was where Krokodil came from.
Yeah.
So
very prolific.
Yes, very, very bad. Just a nasty. If you really want to vomit, go look up pictures of patients who have been shooting Krokodil.
Oh, I did
for a while.
in preparation for today's episode.
Uh-huh.
I did. Actually, I found a video of a guy in a hospital, and he had the Krokodil.
Yeah. Look that up, but we're going to put a warning on that. It is truly disgusting.
Absolutely. This is not... If you're about to go get something to eat,
right,
save it for later.
Just ate.
Yeah,
yeah,
or just ate.
Or your kids are around.
Yeah.
Or you're on one of your first dates with your new boyfriend.
Not
probably
a good time.
Yeah, probably
not
shouldn't be caught looking up this kind of stuff.
Especially if you're like,
hey, what you looking at, honey?
What are you into?
Right. Exactly. No, yeah. So, if you're going to look it up, that's great. We did. But just make sure that you're prepared in your mind, in your head properly for what you're going to see.
Yeah.
So, negative effects, it causes severe brain deterioration. These people just end up having a long-term deterioration of their ability of cognitive abilities.
Yeah. And so some of that is going to come from, and the problem with opiates, as we mentioned earlier, is that air hunger decreases.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't breathe as much. You get less oxygen. You can have hypoxic brain injuries from this. Hypoxic brain injury is just not enough oxygen to the brain.
Right.
Brain deteriorates. Let's see. You can catch infectious diseases, especially if you're shooting up.
Well, because you're sharing needles. This is why needle exchanges, although can be controversial, are advocated for, is because people are using dirty needles. They'll use the same one over and over again with multiple people.
Yeah.
So if one person has HIV, they can infect everybody who's using that. Or hepatitis, or tetanus, or what other plethora of diseases that can be passed along by this. It can collapse your veins. It can actually do damage to the veins right in the area, to the point that they just stop functioning.
Well, this is actually one of the things we'll even see, because we start IVs for a living.
Right.
And which is essentially the same idea. You're putting a needle into a vein. And this causes physical damage, and they will scar. Right. And one of the side effects here, too, is we'll go on patients who have a history of drug abuse, are now having real medical problems, and need IV medications. We can't get it.
Ran a guy.
Why don't you walk him, man? It's nicer.
Nope, I'm going to run. Because I care, Chris. Because I care. He had been shot twice in the abdomen.
That sucks.
He was at home with his girlfriend. 2 guys busted into his house, tried to rob him. He chased him around, and they shot him twice in the abdomen. Could not get an IV on this guy, and he told us straight up, "You're not going to get an IV on me. I was a drug user for many years, an IV drug user, and my veins are crap."
Damn.
And he was right. We did not get an IV on him.
Yeah.
So
that's sad.
Constipation, which is a very common side effect of opioids.
Yeah, we actually see that a lot of people who have prescription pain meds as well. They're often prescribed a prescription pain med, which is an opioid,
right,
and a laxative as well.
Right. It can cause decreased blood pressure. One of the side effects of opiates is that it causes your vasculature to dilate. And if you listen to our cardiac episode, you'll learn that 3 things are needed to have good blood pressure. One of them is the size of the container, which is your vasculature, the amount of fluid you have in there, and then the pump.
Yeah, and so if those veins get too big, you drop pressure.
Right.
Although we'll actually use it as a treatment sometimes. Heroin? Not heroin, but morphine as an opioid was a common treatment for cardiac chest pain. and because it would cause some vasculature.
Well, we still use fentanyl.
Yeah, we do. We still use
Which
fentanyl for cardiac.
Can have the same effects. It dilates the vasculature.
Yeah.
So when you do that, it lowers your blood pressure, but it can also, for some strange reason, they put these together, lower your libido.
Damn.
Yeah. So, but it can also slow your breathing and your pulse, which we were talking about. Now, if you couple the fact that it slowed your breathing down and decreased your drive to breathe, and it's altered your mental status so you're not really aware of what's going around you, it can also induce vomiting, which can cause you to aspirate the vomit, causing huge infections, pneumonia.
Mm-hmm. And pneumonia can be lethal.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in fact...
Especially in a demographic that don't generally seek help from emergency services because of their use of heroin. They're averse because they know that if they go to the hospital and there's a possibility the cops will be called, stuff like that. And it's not overly true necessarily if that happens, but it still makes them very, very leery of emergency services.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's some of the down low on heroin.
Let's talk about something a little newer.
Really?
Yeah.
How new you want to go?
Let's go with lean.
Lean. Wow, you're going new.
Purple drank.
Right. So, staying in the opioid vein of things. Opioid vein. Heroin.
That's terrible. Go ahead.
So lean started in Texas since the 2000s. I was watching an episode of a show called Black Market, and they were talking to people, and it started really predominantly in the Houston area, from what I understand.
Okay.
And this is it's a party drug.
Mm-hmm.
It's called lean, and what it is they mix together a cough suppressant that has codeine or promethazine or both in it. So they have to illegally get a hold of this cough syrup. Then they mix it with a pop, predominantly like a Sprite, but they can use any sort of soda. And then Jolly Ranchers thrown in and dissolved to help cover up the taste of the cough medicine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so...
Probably grape Jolly Rancher, I'd imagine, if we're going for purple.
Well, yeah, apparently the purple comes from the purple drink. The name purple drink comes from the fact that the cough syrup makes it purple.
Oh, fair enough.
That's where it comes from, yeah. Again, this is codeine cough syrup, so they're very dangerous because codeine can be a very powerful drug.
Yeah, and just like the other opiates we've talked about, heroin, has those same side effects of decreasing air hunger. People don't want to breathe as much, and so their body won't, and that's pretty much what the overdose is your body is so respiratory depressed, that's what that's called, respiratory depression, that you don't take in enough air, and you die.
Right. The prescription cough syrup makes it dangerous because codeine, like any other opioid, can be very, very addictive. Another problem with this drug is that drink to drink, literally, you don't know the strength of it. Because they're mixing it right there at the table.
Yeah. Suddenly Jerry takes over, and now you've got more.
Jerry's a little more liberal with his codeine part.
Which, by the way, this is what kills my street cred. In my mind, this is essentially a lemonade stand at a party. Right. And there's like a pitcher and some styrofoam cups.
Right. Well, and then you couple that with a lot of times at these parties, they're also smoking marijuana.
Ooh,
right?
Marijuana cigarettes?
Yes, marijuana.
Yeah.
They're smoking pot, which can also be a depressant. They're drinking alcohol other than the lean.
When we say depressant, we mean respiratory depressants.
Right. Then you're also drinking alcohol. And the cumulative effects of this can be devastating to your body. So a lot of times this is at parties now. It's gone nationwide. This is something that happens across the nation. It was very interesting. I saw on that TV show is that how in Houston, lean parties where they have lean are generally very mellow. Whereas when you go to other parts of the country, there's actually much more rambunctious and can be very dangerous. It doesn't really mellow out the party the way it does in Houston.
Yeah.
And
I believe that this was made popular in the hip hop scene, more of the southern rap.
Yep. And the show that I was watching, it was a lot of recording rap artists and everything like that. They would have recording episodes or like and these are actually. Now that you mentioned that, there was I believe it was Lil Wayne.
Yeah, well, so there's a story behind there that you might have actually seen. This was actually in August of 2017. One of the major pushers of Purple Drink was a guy that went by the name of Harry. Well, it's Harrison Garcia's his name. Cuban Harry was his nickname, and he was the self-proclaimed CEO of Purple Drank. And so he his Instagram account had some 36,000 followers, and he was kind of a figure. And there's pictures of him with Chris Brown, Lil Wayne, some of these celebrities, and he actually posted enough evidence against himself on Instagram to implicate himself as one of the major dealers and one of the major pushers of Purple Drank.
Really?
Yeah, so he was responsible for really, I guess, it was the South Florida scene. Right. And just pumping that full of Purple Drank. And
right.
because he was selling the ingredients. He's making money.
Oh, yeah.
And so, but yeah, he basically posted enough photographic evidence of himself that he was arrested by police.
If you're going to go to jail, you might as well do the work for the police for them.
Which is nice.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure the police thanked him for it. Yeah. So you keep calling it Purple Drank, but it also goes by a couple other different names. Purple Lean, Scissorup, Dirty Sprite, and Lean Drink. So
I think Lean Drink is just not very...
Right.
They should have really thought that one through. I don't think
so. Lean is really addictive because of the codeine in there. The codeine is a powerful opioid. It's generally found in smaller doses, which is why people don't think it's that dangerous. When you're mixing it out of a cough syrup, it is actually very potent. But also, a lot of cough syrups have promethazine in it, and this reduces your congestion from allergies and colds. And in small amounts, it's fine. But when you take it in large amounts, you can have seizures, hallucinations, wheezing, night terrors, confusion. And then you combine that with the codeine and any other drugs you may be doing or alcohol you may be doing. And actually, Lil Wayne was put in the hospital after drinking too much. He actually got hospitalized, So the chance, and like we said, first guy makes the first drink, puts a certain amount in. Somebody else comes along. Night's been going on a little bit. Everybody's a little bit high. Everybody's a little bit drunk. They're not paying as much attention. They're just more liberal with everything. And so your next drink is much more potent.
Yeah.
And then your next drink is much more potent. And next thing you know, you wake up in a hospital, hopefully.
Well, and here's the thing about this is when they're talking about these drinks, it's easy to use it.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, I don't want to say skill, but...
you don't have to know how to freebase and find a vein.
Absolutely. And
you're drinking a drink.
And it's built to taste good.
Right.
Or at least taste passable.
Right. And like I said, Sprite is very common, but they are actually, on that show I was watching, there were areas where certain pops were very popular with this, and it was usually your fruity type pop drinks that people really were attracted to.
I imagine strong flavors.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to kind of cover that up. So you want to talk about Krokodil, kind of stay in the opiate lane a little bit, and then maybe finish up with some bath salts?
Yeah.
Which, by the way,
a party.
Yeah. Which okay, brief digression here. When bath salts first really started hitting the news, I will openly claim my ignorance on that one. I didn't really know what it was.
What?
And I was literally sitting here because we had actually had some actual bath salts for the bath in our home.
There was a thing I was reading today, and there was on the webpage I was reading, they were talking about bath salts, but then there was one of these little cutout boxes that was highlighted. It was and basically what it came down to is this is not to be confused with Epsom salts, which are used in baths to help people for medicinal reasons.
which we had. They just make the bath smell good. Is what the ones we had. But I'm sitting here, I'm like, bath salts. Why would you use bath salts as a drug? No wonder this guy went crazy. That's just silly. I wonder if he used sage. We use sage, But anyway,
should we be using sage? Maybe we shouldn't have this in our bath.
Sounds terrible.
Exactly.
But Krokodil. So Krokodil it's hit the news a little bit, and like we'd mentioned earlier, the striking feature of Krokodil isn't necessarily the fact that it's addictive or like what it does to get people high. It's that what it can do to the flesh.
Well, because everything they mix it with.
And we're gonna get to that ingredients list.
Well, and again, this is kind of a newer drug.
Yeah,
and it's really hasn't made a huge yet impact in America, but there's a reason for that. What's the reason?
Well, so in Russia, I wouldn't say the main ingredient, one of the key ingredients is codeine. And so in Russia, it's available over the counter.
Right.
And here it's not.
Right.
And so what happened, so in about 2002, this is when it really started showing up, and it was primarily in Russia, actually in Siberia, that area. And what people were using it for was when heroin became too expensive for a junkie, this was a way to continue to get that heroin high. Now, technically, Krokodil is much more powerful than heroin itself.
Right.
But the risk of Krokodil is so much greater. That is why this is the second step usually.
Right.
One publication that I read had estimated that once someone has become addicted to Krokodil, life expectancy is between 1 and 2 years.
Right. Well, these are patients. I mean, if you decide to go look at the pictures, and again, only do it if you're really interested in just disgusting things, because it eats away the skin.
Do not eat pork chops immediately afterwards. I'm just going to tell you.
No, but I mean, it literally, the skin is sloughing away, and there are reports of people leaving the hospital to go get high again, even though there may be bone exposed in the areas where they inject it.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's it is that addicting. It's more addicting than heroin.
It is more addicting than heroin, but also it has a shorter action time, so you have to do it more often.
Right.
But like meth, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So Krokodil. So I think like what Mark was probably about to say here. Krokodil is something that people are making at home, and it's actually a form of medication called desomorphine. So desomorphine's been around a long time. It was an alternative to morphine that was a designer drug that was made by a company specifically to have a quick onset and not last very long and then go away. And the idea was that it's easier to treat patients that way in terms of being able to provide them temporary relief, but not snow them to where you can no longer assess their mental
capabilities. For what we do, this is one of the reasons people have gone to fentanyl and EMS.
Yeah.
Is because morphine has a longer onset time and a longer action time. So we can give patients fentanyl. It takes effect more quickly, but once you get to the hospital, it wears off more quickly.
And that allows physicians to examine. Unfortunately, pain is part of any examination.
Right.
And so we got to kind of know where you're at
there. But then they, if they find that the patient doesn't need longer term analgesics, they can, they don't get the morphine. But if they do, then they can move on to medications that have a longer action time.
Yeah. So what ends up happening, for them to make this, they purchase codeine, again, over the counter in Russia, and they mix it with paint thinner, gasoline,
iodine,
and then red phosphorus, again, from match heads.
This is the same stuff you're making meth with.
Yeah.
And when we talked about how bad meth was for your body, this stuff is even worse.
Yeah. Oh, and here's a tip, folks, really quick. If you notice the theme, if one of the ingredients could say power an automobile, you probably shouldn't.
If you could light your cigarette with it.
Yeah, exactly. If you are cooking, if you're lighting up your crack pipe with it,
right,
then you don't need to use that as a drug.
Then you don't need to be smoking it with the crack.
Yeah, absolutely.
But this medication, one of the reasons it's so bad, is highly, highly, highly addictive. So, but it's also got the shorter action time.
You got to keep going back.
So whereas you would do 1, maybe 2 heroin once, maybe twice in a day, now you're doing it 4 and 5 times in a day. Yeah. And this is extremely destructive because you're injecting it straight into the skin with this iodine, this paint thinner, mixed in and cooked into this, and it will actually cause. The reason it's called Krokodil
makes your skin look like crocodile skin
because it gives you before it starts sloughing off. It will give you a scaly skin just like a crocodile.
What these are is a bunch of small little blisters. So essentially you're getting chemical burns under there. And this is an effect that happens when something called extravasation occurs. And that is when whatever that was supposed to be injected into the vein gets outside of the vein and into the surrounding tissues. Now, bear in mind, you can actually hit the vein just fine and have this occur, especially when you're injecting things like paint thinner and gasoline, because they will actually destroy and break down the vein.
Right.
When you go back to that same vein again and again, you could otherwise hit it, and then that time when you push, because the vein's been so destroyed, it now seeps out into the surrounding tissues. And that's what causes this Krokodil. And it will destroy the surrounding flesh right down to the bone.
Well, I mean, we talk about it becomes scaly. It can also become gangrenous. So you get gangrene from using this. And then if it gets to that point, your only option is amputation.
Right. And keep in mind, it's not just if you're at the point of getting gangrene, you're also just a few steps away from becoming what we could call septic. Any infection that you can now get at the
a few
site.
steps away,
You're probably there.
Yeah, you're going septic because your body is dying.
You're waiting for the butler to open the door before you walk into the sepsis land.
Right.
Like, that's where you're at. And what sepsis is when an infection goes from a localized spot, which would be the injection site, and spreads throughout the rest of your body.
Right.
That's called septicemia.
Becomes systemic.
Yeah. And that's lethal. In addition to the drug being lethal because it's a respiratory depressant, just like the other opioids we talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like I said, meth is horrible. This stuff is worse.
Yeah.
Thankfully, it's not spread in the North American region because of the regulation of codeine, so it becomes much more difficult. And I believe they've been talking about, and it may have changed that codeine may not be available over the counter in Russia now. I'm not sure. I didn't actually look that up.
I didn't either.
So, hopefully they've changed the rules. Maybe they have, maybe they haven't. I don't know. But So let's bring it on home with bath salts.
Yeah.
Not the Epsom salts that you put in your bath.
So this first broke the news to me. I first heard about bath salts. I actually believe you sent me a link. This was before we ever did the podcast.
Right.
And, so Mark and I, like anybody, we like our zombie movies.
Right.
And one of the early stories that I recall was there was a man had chased down somebody that I don't even think he knew and beat them and ate their face.
Was chewing on their face when the cops got there.
Yeah. And I believe he was shot, too. Yeah, I was chewing on the patient's face, or the other person's face, which then became a patient, when they got there. And that was the first time I heard about bath salts. And yes, that was when I'm like, oh, man.
Yeah.
We got some of these in our house.
Exactly.
Then I read and I'm like, oh.
Oh, yeah, that's not the same thing. Absolutely not the same thing.
I feel kind of dumb now.
Right. So this is the synthetic cathinones, such as mephedrone, which are chemically similar to cathinone, which are naturally found in a plant. Now, these were first synthesized in the 1920s, but it never really took off until the beginning of the 21st century, around 2000, 2002, where they were kind of rediscovered by these underground chemist labs, where what these are is they are non-regulated, obviously, being underground, but they have everything they need that a professional, this would be the Walter Whites.
Yeah.
These are professional chemists. They know what they're doing, and they're making designer drugs out of things that aren't illegal.
Right.
So when bath salts first came out, why were they called bath salts?
I believe just so they could ship them a little more incognito.
And they could sell them because it was never meant to be taken. It's like spice. The drug spice, which is a synthetic THC.
Yeah.
Was never intended by the manufacturer to be ingested. It was sold as an incense. So it wasn't illegal.
Or therefore not regulated by the FDA.
Right, and what you do with it after you purchase it is not on us. Where we sell it as a bath salt.
Wow.
So, yeah, but again, even if they sold it to be ingested, it wasn't illegal, other than it was unregulated.
Yeah. Wow.
Because these were drugs that they were perfectly legal because nobody had ever used them before. I mean, these things, thousands of these drugs are made every year, and they can be made for completely legitimate reasons. Now, this is a completely legitimate drug that I'm going to get ready to talk to, but Rogaine for men. Why was it developed?
Grow hair?
No. It was an antihypertensive.
Really?
And it was an antihypertensive, and they found that when applied topically, it increased hair growth.
Oh, wow. Well, it's kind of
they cut bait on the antihypertensive line, and they went straight for male egos.
Well, and let's talk about Viagra.
Yeah?
Viagra actually started out as an alternative to nitroglycerin. So we give nitroglycerin for people who are having angina, which is chest pain.
Or heart attack.
Yeah, or heart attack. And the idea behind that is it causes that vasodilation. So if you do have an infarction or basically a clog in a pipe to the blood flow to the heart, this helps dilate those pipes to allow blood flow around that problem area. And what they were working on was a medication that would be more targeted because the side effect of nitroglycerin is it also drops the entire body's blood pressure by causing vasodilation.
You know it's working
elsewhere.
when it gives you a headache.
Yeah, and so they were working on a medication to be more targeted. And it is.
Right.
They just missed the target.
Right, the target's not the heart.
Yeah. And again, they're like, hey, male egos.
Right. Oh, yeah, and the problem is that we have to, before we give nitroglycerin, we have to make sure the patient's not have been using any sort of erectile dysfunction medications because they will potentiate each other and can cause blood pressure to drop off to the point that you can't sustain life.
Yeah. Yep.
back to bath salts.
Right.
So,
away from boner pills.
Exactly. Away from men's egos and back to bath salts. So these underground labs, started making these drugs and putting them out. Now, in 2009, 2010, significant rise in the UK and the rest of Europe, and then, of course, the United States with these drugs. Drugs marketed as bath salts first came to the attention of authorities in 2010 after reports were made to U.S. poison centers. And then that was around that time, I believe, that this story came out. But at that point, they're being sold in gas stations and head shops,
everywhere.
And it made them easier to obtain than cigarettes and alcohol because there was no regulation on these things. You could go into the right gas station. It's not regulated. It's not illegal to sell to somebody who's 18 or 16 or however.
5?
Yeah. I mean, so...
That might be an exaggeration.
That's probably an exaggeration, but they can also be bought online and sold in packets. So the ability to get this was tremendously increased.
Yeah.
Until 2011.
Yeah.
And then the DEA had an emergency scheduling of the MDPV, which was the main ingredients in this.
The cathinone, is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
It's I had that down somewhere and I can't find it right now. But it was signed in July 2012. President Obama signed a law banning mephedrone, the main component in it, the methylone, and the MDVP, which they're all common ingredients in bath salts. So, again, they're in these underground chem labs. They're coming out as very pure, very good. And to this day, we're still seeing these drugs occasionally come out where it's a designer drug. There was one a couple years ago that came through our area. It was called, I want to say like I-25.
Okay.
And it caused seizures and everything else. My first introduction to this was a 16-year-old kid who was being held down and was handcuffed, buck naked, after running around in an apartment complex, screaming and yelling. And a couple kind citizens had detained him.
Oh boy!
In the grass on his face. They were, and called 911. Or actually, they didn't call 911. They're getting ready to call 911. And a state trooper who was going home for dinner happened to be driving by. And I looked up and go, oh, that sucks.
Yeah, yeah.
He's wanting to get home, have a little bit of lunch, have dinner with his family. He was very appreciative. Well, he was very appreciative because he was going to follow us to the hospital. It's like, well, he's under the age of 18. He's completely whacked out of his head. I said, we can take him on implied consent.
Yeah,
we can't refuse it. We're not going to let him out if he wants to get out of the back of the rig. So
sometimes we need police officers to do what's called a police officer's hold if someone doesn't want to go with us.
Right. So, yeah, I was like, yeah, we can take him under implied consent. He's like, oh, great. So, well, yeah, okay, I'll come and have dinner then.
Right.
But we ended up having to 4-point restraint this kid to the gurney with soft restraints because he was just so out of his head. Only thing he would yell the whole way to the hospital was, it's in my butt! It's in my butt!
Well, did you look?
Well, I told my partner it was his last day of training, and I go,
that sounds like a chief complaint to me.
He said, an excellent paramedic would look to make sure. He goes, I've always been very comfortable as a C student.
You know what? Good response.
Yeah.
Good response.
Really good response.
Let's see. This also goes by Bliss, Cloud9, Lunar Wave. See, I would take something called Lunar Wave.
We all know that you cannot handle your drugs.
Vanilla Sky.
Right.
That sounds like a plug-in, like a wall outlet plug-in to make your house smell nice.
White Lightning.
I like how, by the way, White Lightning, no G on the end.
That may have been the way it is spelt. That may have been piss poor typing on my part.
No, let's go with the way it's spelled.
Okay.
That's a better story. What does this do for people, though? So let's see. It's
similar to cocaine, but 10 times more powerful.
Oh, that's exciting.
So here it is. I finally found the thing. The MDPV. It's methyl deoxyprovalerone.
Bless you.
Provalerone. Yeah. MDPV, those who know.
Yeah, it's MDPV.
Yeah.
You got the mid-piv?
Yeah. 10 times more powerful than cocaine, and it's the most common synthetic cathinone found in blood and urine of patients admitted to emergency departments after taking bath salts.
And the bad side of this thing is paranoia, extreme and unreasonable distrust of others.
Oh, yes.
Hallucinations. Although, now, here's the thing. The paranoia and the hallucinations, that makes sense for the eating of the face. Next one on the list, though, is increased friendliness.
Well, it depends on how you define friendliness. Chris.
And sex drive, because that's the next one.
Right.
Increased sex drive.
Increased sex drive. Panic attacks.
That makes sense.
Then this last one, we kind of touched on this a little while ago, is excited delirium.
Yeah.
This is actually becoming a problem for people in emergency services, police departments, EMS professionals, because these are patients that they are amped up on these drugs.
Mm-hmm.
They are so out of touch with reality, you just can't make sense with them.
No.
There are some videos online. You can see one particular of a guy who's at home, and he's like in his 20s, and he's a good-sized guy, and he's buck naked. These people tend to be naked. They don't understand what's going on around them, and when they feel threatened, they will fight.
And you are the enemy. And you're not just an enemy. You are a life-threatening enemy.
These people are not just trying to defend themselves. They are fighting for their life.
That is the only time I've ever been scared in the back of an ambulance. Well, I don't know if it's the only time, but it's one of the few times where I've been legitimately scared in the back of an ambulance. And I'm going to admit, this was like a 14, 15-year-old girl.
Right.
But she'd got... Here's what a lot of people don't understand. One person, especially on drugs, but even not, to restrain one essentially full-grown adult, that's all your energy.
Uh-huh.
It's not like you're going to do that and get your IV ready.
Right.
And so basically what I did was...
To do it safely, we generally have 5, 6 people.
Yeah.
To strap down one person.
Well, she was a little out of her gourd before we started transport, but nothing that I would have had any indicator to need to take extra people with me.
Right.
And we were just a few blocks away from a local hospital. And when we got maybe 2 more blocks, she decided it's on. And she'd been kind of fighting her safety belts the entire time. And finally she had gotten them off. And she starts, and I'm on the bench, and I'm thinking she's going to go for the back door, which, here's my policy. I will slow down. Slow down. I don't want you to hurt yourself.
Right.
But at the same time, I'm not going to get hurt.
Right.
Or risk going out that door with you.
Right.
That's your choice. I'm sorry you've made bad choices today. Well, she didn't. Straight for me. And so the only thing, it's straight for me.
Right.
And like claws out. Mm-hmm. And so the only thing I could do is I basically just jumped forward, sorry about that. Jumped forward, just kind of put my arms straight out and just kind of bear hugged her, and then back onto the gurney. I grabbed the supports of the gurney and just pulled down and just sandwiched her down on the gurney. And
this is the problem, is that these people, like I said, they're not fighting to defend themselves. Most people, if you get into a fight, a physical confrontation with somebody, there's usually a point in the fight where pretty much everybody knows who's going to win. And if you are on the losing side of that, you have a point in your head that says, okay, I need to get out of this situation. And you're not going to try and kill this person because it's just a fight. It's a physical confrontation.
Yeah.
With these people, and it can be people who, there are different classifications in my mind. Some of your patients who are mentally challenged. I'm not talking special needs people. I'm talking some of your dementia patients. Mm-hmm. I'm talking some special needs people. But the people that they don't have that switch of, okay, that's too far. They're doing, in their mind, especially these people with excited delirium, they are fighting for their life, and they're going to kill or die.
Yeah.
And so the problem with that is that as emergency service professionals, you should legitimately be using just enough to subdue them. But when they're going all in,
you got to go all in.
You've got to go all in with just enough to stop them. Mm-hmm. The difference is, again, us being sober, if it gets that bad, we know when to back off because we're getting too hot. We're getting overtired. We're getting, these patients don't have that switch. And so they will keep fighting and keep fighting and keep fighting till either they go into cardiac arrest because their heart gives up, or they become so hyperthermic that they start having seizures and detrimental effects because their body has become so overheated.
Right.
This is what can happen in raves, where people are so high, they are dancing out on the floor. It's hot in the building because you have hundreds of people all dancing. You're not stopping to drink or cool off or go outside. And they will become just like the heroin makes you not want to breathe. These drugs will make you want to do stuff to the point that you do it till it kills you.
Wow, yeah.
You know,
Exciting stuff.
yeah. So yeah, there's like I said, there's videos, and some of the videos I've seen is one of them was how to do it wrong, and another one of the scenes was how it's done right, where the police showed up. This guy's buck naked. He's screaming just insane things at them. At one point where he's on the ground and they're holding him down on the ground by his limbs, he's worried about making sure, or asking if he can touch his penis. I just want to touch my penis. I just want to touch my penis. And that's all he's worried about.
Yeah.
They brought in EMS. We have a protocol to restrain people chemically. Now, what this means is you're sedating them.
Yeah.
The problem is with some of these people, our protocol doesn't allow is not enough medication to properly sedate these people because they're so over the top. So then we have to physically restrain them. But then we have to be worried about whether they're going to become hypothermic or if they're going to do anything else to themselves.
Yeah.
So that's some of our street drugs we're going to talk about.
And I think we're going to do this again.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
there's a lot more we can talk about. Like I said, we're going to do one about opiates. Just the opiate scare and the opiate crisis that we have going on in the country. I think that should be a good episode.
Yeah, I think probably touching on MDMA, ecstasy.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, there's a lot more out there that we can do. And yeah, I think we'll do another one of these in the near future.
This was fun.
So, my name's Mark. That's Chris over there.
Yay.
We're available on Twitter at medical stuff, at medside stuff, MEDSIDESTUFF.
You can also find us on Google Play and the iTunes Store.
And then we have an email. It's medsidestuff@yahoo.com.
All right.
So if you have any questions, concerns, complaints, keep your complaints to yourself. But we just want positivity in our life. Thank you.
Yeah. We have fragile egos.
We do. Thank you for listening, and we will talk to you later. Toast.